Legacy of Rx-47. Months passed, and Rx-47 transformed from a death trap into a thriving research outpost. What began as a barren wasteland of jagged rocks and hostile creatures was now a bustling hub of human ingenuity. The base, dubbed Outpost Resolute, was built near the cave where Elena had first taken shelter. It stood as a monument to her survival, a reminder of humanity's tenacity. Elena walked through the reinforced corridors of the outpost, feeling a strange mix of pride and unease. She had been appointed Chief Operations Officer for Rx-47, overseeing the research teams and the colony's development. Everywhere she went, people greeted her with respect and sometimes awe. To them, she wasn't just a leader, she was a symbol of hope. Captain Marsh, a young scientist, called, jogging to catch up with her. We finalized the analysis on the fungi you found in the caves. You'll want to hear this. Elena nodded and followed the scientist to the lab. Inside, researchers were huddled around glowing screens, their faces lit with excitement. On one monitor, a simulation showed how the fungi's unique properties could stimulate rapid cellular regeneration. It's incredible, the scientist explained. This could revolutionize medicine. We're talking about treatments for terminal illnesses, faster recovery from injuries, and extending human lifespans, all because of what you found down there. Elena stared at the screen, her throat tightening. She remembered the bitter taste of the fungi, how it had kept her alive when she had no other options. Now it was more than a lifeline, it was a gift to humanity. That's good work, she said softly. Make sure the Federation knows. This is bigger than Rx-47. It's bigger than us. The scientist nodded, beaming. Understood, Captain. Not all frontiers are friendly, but not everything on Rx-47 was so cooperative. The creatures that had nearly killed Elena continued to haunt the outpost's perimeter. Advanced weaponry and automated defenses kept them at bay, but the beasts were persistent. Every night, the outer walls trembled as the creatures tested the humans' resolve. Elena stood in the command center, watching surveillance feeds of the perimeter. On one screen, a massive creature larger than any they had seen before prowled the outskirts of the base. Its glowing eyes burned like twin suns in the darkness. Is that new? She asked the officers on duty. Yes, ma'am, the officers replied. It showed up 2 nights ago, bigger, smarter, and more cautious than the others. We're calling it Apex. Elena's jaw tightened. She had thought she'd seen the worst Rx-47 had to offer. But this creature was on another level. Its movements were deliberate, almost calculated. It wasn't just hunting, it was studying them. Double the patrols, she ordered, and I want an analysis of its behavior. If it's organizing the others, we need to know how. Yes, ma'am. As the officers relayed her orders, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The creatures weren't just mindless predators, they were evolving. And if humanity wanted to survive on Rx-47, they would have to evolve, too. The turning point. Weeks later, Apex made its move. In the dead of night, it led a coordinated assault on Outpost Resolute. The beasts surged toward the walls in waves, their shrieks piercing the air. Automated turrets roared to life, cutting down scenes. But Apex was relentless. It tore through the outer defenses with terrifying speed, its claws slicing through reinforced steel like paper. Elena was in the thick of it, leading the defense teams as alarms blared around her. Hold the line, she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Fall back to the inner perimeter if you have to, but don't let them breach the command center. The battle raged for hours. Humans and creatures clashed under the crimson sky, the ground stained with blood from both sides. Apex was a force of nature, its strength unmatched, but humanity had something the creatures didn't: strategy. Elena had anticipated this attack. She had set a trap. Now, she yelled into her communicator. Deep below the outpost, charges planted along the cave system detonated. The ground shook violently as the tunnels collapsed, cutting off the creature's reinforcements. Apex roared in fury, its advantage slipping away. Elena seized the moment. Grabbing a heavy plasma rifle, she joined the front line, aiming directly at Apex. The creature locked eyes with her, its gaze fueled with primal rage. This is for every person you've hunted, she growled, pulling the trigger. A blast hit Apex square in the chest, sending it crashing to the ground. The remaining creatures scattered, their leader defeated. For the first time since arriving on X-47, the humans had the upper hand. A new era. The victory against Apex marked a turning point for X-47. The outpost expanded, its defenses reinforced with lessons learned from the battle. The creatures remained a threat, but humanity had proven they could stand their ground. Elena stood on the observation deck, looking out over the planet that had tried so hard to break her. The sky was still crimson, the winds still fierce, but it no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like home. "We'll make this work," she said quietly to herself. Because that's what humans did. They didn't just survive, they thrived. And X-47, for all its dangers, was now a testament to their strength. It wasn't just a story of survival anymore. It was the beginning of humanity's next great chapter. HFY Tales, pushing the limits of survival. The shuttle crashed with a gut-wrenching roar, scattering debris across the barren landscape of X-47. Captain Elena Marsh stumbled out of the wreckage, coughing as acrid smoke stung her lungs. The mission had gone sideways in every conceivable way. What was supposed to be a simple resource scouting trip had turned into a fight for survival. The planet wasn't supposed to be hostile. Initial scans had indicated breathable air, manageable gravity, and no signs of significant life. But now, standing amidst jagged rocks and the faint glow of a crimson sky, Elena knew the scanners had light. Her comms crackled with static as she flipped her wrist-mounted communicator. "Ensign Davis, anyone, respond." Only silence answered. She sighed, forcing her legs to move. Her survival training kicked in, prioritized shelter, water, and a plan. The shuttle was a total loss, but a piece of the hull offered shade from the relentless wind, which carried sand sharp enough to shred exposed skin. She scavenged what she could: a water canister, a broken plasma cutter, and a tattered emergency kit. It wasn't much, but humans were nothing if not resourceful. Elena slumped against the hull fragment, letting herself breathe for a moment. Then she heard a low, guttural growl. Her heart jumped into her throat. Slowly, she turned her head. The creature was enormous, its six-legged frame silhouetted against the setting sun. Its eyes glowed like embers, and its elongated jaw revealed razor-sharp teeth. It was nothing like the scans had predicted. It wasn't supposed to exist. Elena frowned. Her mind raced. Run, hide, fight. It charged. Adrenaline surged as she rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding its claws. She scrambled to her feet, clutching the broken plasma cutter. The creature lunged again, and she swung wildly. Sparks flew as the cutter's edge grazed its armored hide. The beast roared in pain but didn't back down. Elena's hands shook as she searched for something, anything that could give her an advantage. Her eyes landed on a sharp fragment of the shuttle's wing. She dove for it, her fingers wrapping around the jagged edge just as the creature pounced. With a primal scream, she drove the fragment into its side. The beast howled, thrashing wildly before collapsing in a heap. Blood, thick and black, seeped into the ground. Elena staggered back, her chest heaving. "So much for a peaceful planet," she muttered, wiping the sweat from her brow. The victory was short-lived. As she looked around, she noticed glowing eyes emerging from the shadows. There were more of them down scenes. They had been watching, waiting. She clenched her jaw. Survival wasn't just about brute strength. It was about using every ounce of ingenuity, every scrap of human tenacity. Her gaze fell on the wreckage. If she could create a distraction, she might stand a chance. Quickly, she rifled through the emergency kit. Finding a flare, she tied it to a shard of metal and hurled it as far as she could. The flare ignited in midair, hissing and sputtering as it lit up the twilight. The creatures hesitated, their attention drawn to the fiery spectacle. Elena used the distraction to climb a nearby rock formation, hoping to gain higher ground. Her muscles burned, but she pushed on, her grip slipping on the smooth, alien surface. When she reached the summit, she realized her gamble had paid off. The creatures were circling the flare, snarling and snapping at each other, but the reprieve was temporary. They would be back. From her vantage point, she spotted a cave in the distance. It wasn't close, but it was her best bet for shelter. Taking a deep breath, she descended the rock face as quietly as she could. Her every step was deliberate, her senses on high alert. The journey to the cave was grueling. The wind picked up and the temperature dropped sharply as night fell. Elena's body ached, but she didn't stop. The creatures were still out there, and stopping meant death. When she finally reached the cave, she collapsed onto the cold stone floor. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but she couldn't let her guard down. She gathered a pile of rocks near the entrance, creating a makeshift barrier. It wouldn't stop the creatures, but it might slow them down. As the hours passed, the reality of her situation sank in. The odds were against her alone on a hostile planet, surrounded by predators, with no way to call for help. But humanity had faced worse. From the freezing tundras of Earth to the depths of space, humans had always found a way to survive. Elena clenched her fists, her determination hardening. "You want a fight," she whispered into the darkness. "Bring it." Her ancestors had clawed their way out of caves and conquered the stars. She wasn't going to let a few alien beasts end her story. Because if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was pushing the limits of survival. HFY Tales, Pushing the Limits of Survival. Conclusion. Elena awoke to the sound of scratching. It was faint at first, like claws scraping stone, but it grew louder, more persistent. Her heart pounded as she reached for the sharp metal shard she had kept by her side. The cave was pitch black, the faint red glow of the planet sky no longer filtering in. She strained her eyes, but the darkness was impenetrable. The scratching grew into a chorus, echoing off the walls. They were here. She crouched behind her barrier of rocks, gripping her makeshift weapon so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her mind raced. She needed a plan. The creatures were relentless and intelligent enough to coordinate. A frontal assault was suicide, but perhaps the cave itself could be her weapon. Elena scanned the space as her eyes adjusted. The cave ceiling was jagged, with loose stones barely clinging to the surface. If she could create a collapse, it might block the entrancier. If she was lucky, bury the creatures entirely. She fumbled through the emergency kit and found a flare. It wasn't much, but it could generate enough heat to weaken the rock. The creatures' snarls and growls grew louder as their claws began prying at her barrier. She couldn't wait any longer. With trembling hands, she activated the flare and wedged it into a crack above the cave entrance. The heat began to spread, turning the stone orange. She backed away, praying it would work. The creatures burst through the barrier just as the ceiling gave way. Tons of rock and debris crashed down, swallowing the beasts in a cloud of dust and rubble. The noise was deafening, and Elena shielded her face as the shockwave knocked her off her feet. When the dust settled, the entrance was completely sealed. For the first time in hours, silence filled there. Elena slumped against the cave wall, coughing and gasping for breath. She had done it. She had survived, at least for now. But her relief was short-lived. The cave was now her prison, with no way to tell time and limited resources. The crushing reality of her isolation began to sink in. Her water supply was running low, and without a way to signal for help, her odds of long-term survival were slim. Yet, even in the darkness, Elena refused to give up. She was human. After all, humans didn't quit, they adapted. She began to explore the cave, carefully feeling her way along the walls. The air was damp, and she hoped it might lead to an underground spring. Hours, maybe days passed as she navigated the labyrinth of tunnels. Her body grew weaker, but her resolve stayed strong. Eventually, she heard it, a faint dripping sound. Her heart leapt as she followed the noise. Stumbling into a chamber where water trickled from a crack in the wall, she cupped her hands, drinking deeply, the cool liquid reviving her. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her going. Her exploration continued. She found strange fungi growing along the cave walls, glowing faintly in the dark. Hunger gnawed at her, and though she hesitated, she took a cautious bite. The taste was bitter, but it didn't make her sick. It was a gamble, but it paid off. As days turned into weeks, Elena carved out a life for herself. She mapped the cave system, using marks on the walls to keep track of her progress. She built a fire from dried fungi and debris, keeping the chill at bay. She even began to craft tools from stone and scrap metal, preparing herself for the moment she could escape. Her break came when she discovered a narrow tunnel leading upward. It was a tight fit, but she clawed her way through, her muscles screaming in protest. When she emerged into the open air, the sight took her breath away. The crimson sky was still there, but this time it was filled with the flickering lights of ships. Her distress beacon, activated weeks ago before the cave collapse, must have finally been detected. A search and rescue vessel hovered above, scanning the surface. Elena stumbled forward, waving her arms and shouting with the last of her strength. The ship turned toward her, its spotlight locking onto her battered form. Relief washed over her as she collapsed to her knees. When the rescue team carried her aboard, she finally allowed herself to relax. She had survived the crash, the creatures, the cave, and the isolation, and she had done it with nothing but her wits, her willpower, and the indomitable spirit that defined humanity. As the ship ascended into orbit, Elena looked out the window at the planet below. It had tried to kill her at every turn, but she had won. She smiled faintly, knowing that if humanity could survive here, they could survive anywhere. Because that's what humans did. They pushed the limits of survival and they thrived. Epilogue: A New Frontier. Back aboard the rescue ship, Elena lay in the medbay, her body covered in bandages and her muscles aching from weeks of strain. The crew treated her injuries with a mix of awe and respect. Survivors of X-47 were rare. No one had even believed the planet could host such lethal creatures, let alone an environment that had forced a single human to endure for so long. Captain Marsh, a voice called. She turned to see Commander Patel, the mission leader, standing at the doorway. He gave her a warm smile. You're tougher than any skin we've ever run. How are you holding up? Alive, Elena replied, her voice hoarse but steady. That's what matters. Patel chuckled. You're not just alive, you're a damn legend. He held up a datapad. The scans from your distress beacon picked up detailed logs from your survival efforts. The Federation is already reviewing them. They think X-47 might be more valuable than we realized. Valuable? Elena raised an eyebrow. You mean deadly? Both, Patel admitted. Those creatures you encountered are unlike anything we've cataloged. And the fungi you found, early tests suggest its chemical makeup could revolutionize medical treatments. You not only survived, Captain, you've put this planet on the map. Elena let out a dry laugh. Great, I guess I can add bait to my resume. You're more than that, Patel said seriously. You've reminded us why we explore, why humanity keeps pushing forward, even when the odds are against us. X-47 isn't the end, it's the beginning of something bigger. As Patel left her to rest, Elena couldn't help but reflect on his words. The thought of X-47 becoming a hub of scientific exploration felt surreal, but she knew he was right. Humanity was defined by its resilience, its drive to turn adversity into opportunity. Weeks later, Elena stood on the bridge of a Federation research vessel. Against the advice of medics and counselors, she had volunteered to return to X-47 not as a crash survivor, but as a pioneer. She wanted to see the planet on her own terms, not as a victim but as a conqueror. Her team had grown since the rescue. Scientists, engineers, and soldiers worked together, outfitted with better equipment and weapons, all thanks to her first-hand knowledge. As the ship descended through X-47's atmosphere, the familiar crimson sky stretched out before her. This time, she wasn't alone. This time, humanity was ready. Welcome back, Captain, one of the crew said as they prepared to touch down. Elena smirked. Let's get to work. We've got a planet to tame. Because if there was one truth that had been reinforced time and time again, it was this: humanity never backed down. They faced the impossible, adapted, and thrived. X-47 wasn't just a hostile world, it was a testament to everything humans were capable of. And as Elena stepped onto the alien soil once more, she knew that whatever came next, they would endure. They always did. Humanity didn't just push the limits of survival, they redefined them. The final chapter, humanity's claim. Years later, X-47 was no longer a hostile wasteland, but a thriving human colony. Outpost Resolute had grown into Fort Triumph, a sprawling city of domed habitats, research facilities, and industrial hubs. What had once been a symbol of desperation was now a beacon of human innovation. The creatures, now called chimeras, remained a constant presence. Their numbers had dwindled, but humanity had learned to coexist with them not through peace, but through balance. The apex, once the greatest threat, had become a reminder of the planet's dangers and the resilience needed to survive here. Elena Marsh stood on the observation deck of the colony's central tower, watching the crimson horizon. She was no longer a survivor or a commander. Now, she was Governor Marsh, the leader of X-47, responsible for overseeing the colony's future. Her hair had streaks of gray, her scars were deeper, but her eyes still carried the fire that had kept her alive all those years ago. Behind her, a delegation of scientists and engineers awaited her orders. One of them, a young woman named Dr. Leela Tanaka, approached cautiously. "Governor Marsh, the terraforming initiative is ready to begin," Leela said. Elena turned to face her. "You're sure? This planet's fought us every step of the way. Terraforming, it might provoke something we can't handle." Leela nodded. "We've accounted for every variable. The fungi from the caves, the chimera's migration patterns, even the unique atmosphere. This isn't about taming X-47, it's about working with it. We're not here to conquer this planet. We're here to adapt." Elena considered this for a moment, a smile tugging at her lips. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its adaptability. They didn't just survive, they learned, they innovated, and they evolved. "Do it," Elena said finally. "Begin the process." The dawn of a new era. The first stage of terraforming began with the activation of atmospheric stabilizers and climate regulators. Over the next decade, the skies began to shift from crimson to a soft, golden hue. Rivers carved their way across the barren plains, feeding into lush green valleys. The once hostile terrain transformed into fertile land, capable of supporting human life without the constant need for artificial systems. The chimeras adapted as well. The creatures that had once terrorized the colony began to retreat deeper into the wilds, finding their place in this evolving ecosystem. Scientists even discovered that the chimera's biology played a role in maintaining the planet's unique balance, and a new respect for the native life began to take root. Elena lived to see the fruits of their labor. On the 25th anniversary of the colony's founding, she stood on a hill overlooking the city of Fort Triumph. Children laughed and played in the fields. Farmers tended to crops, and the colony thrived under the golden sky. Leela stood beside her, now the head of the terraforming initiative. "We did it," she said quietly. Elena smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "No, humanity did it. We didn't just conquer X-47, we became part of it." As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the landscape, Elena felt a profound sense of peace. X-47 had tried to break her, but instead, it had become her greatest triumph. Humanity had pushed the limits of survival and emerged stronger, smarter, and more united than ever. And as the stars began to appear in the sky, Elena knew this was just the beginning. X-47 was no longer a story of survival, it was a story of home.